Hello and welcome to the latest two-man power trip of wrestling. My host JP John Paz with me today, very special guest, the former King of Pancrase, former UFC World Heavyweight Champion, of course, an MMA legend, the War Master himself, Mr. Josh Barnett. Josh, welcome in. How you doing?
Oh, good to be here.
What's going on in your world? What are you up to? I know, obviously, the big blood sport show coming up.
Well, yeah, that's taken a big part of my time at this point. Bloodsport 12 coming around the corner, November 24th in Jersey City, back at White Eagle Hall, where we started this whole process from the first Josh Barnett's Bloodsport, where with was me versus Minoru Suzuki. This time it'll be me versus MVP. As the headliner, and we're going to be filling it out, still announcing all the different matchups and participants.
Man, that's huge. MVP, and I know I saw that show. He made a huge surprise return out of being WWE, but a huge surprise appearance. I mean, that was pretty damn big time. I feel like that's going to be a marquee matchup for sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that as people are now getting to know more about not only what blood sport is and how you end up in this ring, and by proxy of being allowed in the ring, that you're already somebody who has a different set of skills than you're used to seeing, perhaps. But now people are also starting to understand that MVP has been on a jiu-jitsu, a Brazilian jiu-jitsu journey for quite some time now, all the way to becoming a black belt, not to mention his competitions that he's won. And while, yeah, sure, you'd think that people would be up on top of this kind of stuff, but I mean, to be honest, some of these things kind of fall under the radar. And this show obviously brings that to the forefront because we think that that's incredibly important to highlight. But people forget MVP is a veteran of a very, very long time of being in the WWE, being in New Japan Pro Wrestling, IGF. Um, the guy's been there and done that, and people with that kind of experience are always dangerous.
With you and your experience with Bloodsport, I mean, it's like a who's who. Like you mentioned, Minoru Suzuki, John
Mhm.
Moxley. I mean, you face some of the biggest and maybe best names out there. Does he pose a different threat than somebody you've been used to before?
uh, a different threat. Well, I mean, he is himself. So in that sense, the type of capabilities that MVP possesses are, pretty specific to him. It's been a long time since we rolled, and he has grown quite a lot since that time. I think back then he might have been a blue belt, and now he's a black belt. That's a lot of time in between when we had first locked up on the mats, but also that's a ton of time put into training, experience, and growth. So at this point, I don't even really know exactly what his game would be in terms of jujitsu even. So it's all going to be, something I'm going to have to figure out on the fly when I see him across from me in the ring. And I've a ton of experience under my belt. I've been in the ring with every type of fighter. Um, so I have faith that I'll be able to figure out what the puzzle of MVP is, given a little bit of time. But I just know that he's going to be incredibly tough. And I think people also forget that he's like 240 pounds or close to it, solid. He
Yeah.
is not a small man. He's going to be quite strong. And they may be so used to seeing him on social media or as a mouthpiece for Lashley and Shelton Benjamin. But just because the man's talking doesn't mean the man can't fight.
Right, legit background for sure that he
Mm-hmm.
has, and obviously, he's definitely a veteran. He's been around the block. He's a legit tough guy, and if ask anybody, they'll tell you. So he's going to be, somebody that's definitely going to be a great matchup for you. How about the rest of the card? What else do you have in mind? Because I think I just heard Dominic Guarini versus Kevin Koo has been
Mm-hmm.
added to the card.
Yeah, that I'm going to make that announcement here tonight. In fact, right as I get off the phone with you. But yeah, Dom and Ku are going to actually match up with each other. I think that you know I don't know that you would read anything in between the lines about this other than just two guys who know each other and love each other so well that the thing that they could do most for one another is to fight, and to be able to put it out there in a ring like this. They know that they can show everything and then some. We have Royce Isaacs will be coming back to the show. I know we've already announced. I know Lou Nixon is going to be coming back, bare knuckle fighter and a boxer from merry old England. And Masha Slamovich, a mainstay of GCW and the Bloodsport brand, and there'll be others, and I think a lot of familiar names and actually quite a few new names as well.
When you look at Bloodsport, how do you explain it to people? Like somebody maybe new to it or somebody that is unfamiliar with it. How would you explain Bloodsport?
I say it's the rawest form of professional wrestling, stripped down of all the pomp and circumstance, of all the glitter, and the pageantry, and you could even say like the over the top dramatics, and just stripped down to combat. That's what it is, and it's the hardest hitting event in all of professional wrestling.
Where did the idea come from? Like, is this like a brainchild of you? I know technically it's been around, obviously the movie and stuff, but where
No.
does like the genesis for you? Where does it start?
Well, for me, it was being given the reins and seeing what could be done with this, with the right person putting it together. And for me, I just drawing from all my experience in mixed martial arts as a fighter, as a manager, as a promoter, and a matchmaker, all the things that I've done, and my background in professional wrestling, coming through, going right into New Japan Pro Wrestling without any professional wrestling background per se, and just learning on the road, being taken under the wing by people like Antonio Inoki, training under Billy Robinson, getting to train some under Carl Gotch, and trying to understand where these guys were coming from, and also seeing how the fundamentals of what was trained and what was still being trained by the top guys in New Japan when I was there. Guys that I remembered watching on television myself, and seeing that, well, even they think these fundamentals of catch wrestling, amateur wrestling, kickboxing, submission styles, this is all still stuff that needs to be done all the time. To even if you're going to go out there and jump off the ropes and do this and do that, I mean, all these things are great and there is a place for them, and there's a lot of opportunities to implement those kind of strategies, but at your core, you still need to know how to wrestle. And that really spoke to me. So with Bloodsport, it's just stripping these things away, really focusing on the wrestler and the fight, and letting these things breathe as much as they can. And with that, let that raw aspect catch the emotions and the hearts of the fans. Not using excessive dramas and storylines, big drawn out huge things to try and gather people in, not trying to use overly flashy entrances or this, or it's just the wrestler has to be able to do it themselves. And if it's not in them, it's not in them, and it'll be seen. And generally, if it's not in you in blood sport, then that means you're probably going to suffer a very, very painful night of defeat.
And I was talking to Royce Isaacs a few weeks ago about it, and he was basically, saying he gets to show off his skills. He's a legit shooter. He's got a wrestling background. He's obviously got a grappling background and submissions as well. So it's like you get to show off a little bit some of your skills that maybe you wouldn't necessarily do if you're wrestling for an indie in California someplace. Like it's something where he can kind of showcase his skills.
Well, I mean, if you watch Isaac and Royce in the ring, you'll see him using it whatever ring he may end up in. That strength of his within his training as an amateur wrestler, even as an amateur football player, in university, the submission wrestling training and MMA training he's been doing. these are building blocks towards just making yourself a stronger, better, more effective, more dangerous wrestler in the ring. So these things are all at your disposal, once you've developed and harnessed these skills. I remember meeting Isaac um, way back when. I think it was a suburban street fight thing, and I watched him, go toe to toe in a dirty warehouse, and really presented himself well. He came out on top, and as I got to talking to him, I realized that, oh, this guy, he comes from a pretty fair athletic background. So I just said, come to the room, let's see what you got. And from there, it's been a development cycle with Royce, and even to the point of, at some point, it was like, look, man, I know that the travel to and from the gym can be difficult sometimes, but look, where you're living right now, this place is right close to you, and it's a really solid gym as well. Go get time in on the mats with these guys. Tell them I sent you. They'll take care of you. And this is a great gym. There's a lot to learn from these people. And from there, and he's been on the regular over at this other spot too, and just developing his skills and being on the mats with MMA fighters, casuals, people that are serious about judo and grappling, and that's how you get stronger. That's how you get better. But people also should understand that, like, we really like this. We like wrestling and submission wrestling and MMA, and we like doing this kind of training. It's part of what keeps it fun for us. And if professional wrestling wasn't fun, I don't think anybody would do it.
Yeah, definitely. As far as Bloodsport, the cool thing is you never know who's going to show up. Charlie
No, you
Dempsey,
don't.
he's right, like he's in NXT. He's showing MVP shows up as a surprise. Shayna
Mm-hmm.
Baszler, obviously one of your students, she
Yeah.
shows up. Is that like a key component too? Like anybody can kind of show up and do this.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, one way that keeps us in the minds of the fans out there, even those that don't really follow us. uh, they're as they're following pro wrestling in general, they're gonna be hit with all this. Oh yeah, this guy just showed up. This gal just showed up at show. Holy moly, this person was announced. And they sit back and they're like, well, and maybe they're not even fans of what we do, but they're going to be sitting back talking in that sphere of other fans. Well, why did this show get so and so? How is this happening? And that, it just piques people's interest, even when it's because they're mad about it. There is really no no really bad scenario where that's not helping us, and also helping these wrestlers too, because I want wrestlers that get into our ring to not only have the experience and the moment to be truly who they are in the most pure form in that ring in combat, but I want them to walk out of the ring better than they were when they got in it. I want them to be more engaged, more fired up about their own careers, and I want a place where these other organizations and even just the fans can see this wrestler in a light where it is just the wrestler. You can really see them. Like, people aren't trying to, as they say, get their shit in. It's not like a typical script that you might see across one organization or another, where the match looks like, they walk 180, lock up, do a few things, maybe do some wrist lock stuff. And it's not, and then they go to an apron, and then they're outside a little bit, then they're back in, then they hit their special moves. Now they're in. It's just like, no, there's none of that. If you're not watching the match, you don't know what's going on, and you are going to miss what is really happening in here. And excuse me, matches can turn on an instant. Matches can also be one of attrition, where someone is just grinding this person down and trying to take away their strength and wear them out and fatigue them. Um, any number of tactics and strategies, you're going to see them in blood sport. And the main thing is, we're all out there to walk out with our hands raised. We want to go and finish that opponent in front of everybody who's watching live on Fight TV, and everybody who's there in the audience.
Not to get too much into like inner workings of it, but is it easy to get WWE people and WWE talent to do it because of your background and because of your relationship, obviously, with Shane and different people? But is that easy for you to kind of be able to get talent? Because it's kind of like surprising. Sometimes like, wow, this guy's in NXT or she's in WWE or he's in WWE.
Mm-hmm.
Is it easy for you, maybe because of your background and your credibility?
I would never define. I would never define it as easy. I just think that through years of communicating with the people in the WWE, with having not just Shayna, even though she is one of my students, but a variety of wrestlers have actually either been trained by me or even while they're in WWE were coming to get training from me and developing relationships over time and showing myself to be someone that can be trusted with their talent. I think that's just really what it comes down to, and that's not something I take lightly. Nor do I mean I know there's no slight in saying easy, uh, but perhaps it's because I do treat it so importantly that that's why I'm allowed to use these athletes, and I think that they see that what they get by being a part of Bloodsport makes them better. Even if they're going to go back to NXT and do or WWE or anywhere they're going to be, and maybe what they do resembles nothing like what they did in Bloodsport, and that's okay. That doesn't matter. But I know that they're a better wrestler for being in that ring, and I believe that the WWE thinks the same way. And so as long as we're able to showcase the athletes and the spirit of what we do with Bloodsport, I think we're in the win.
When you look at Bloodsport, obviously GCW is with you, Brett Lauderdale. What's that relationship like with Brett and GCW?
That's a lot of talk over Facebook Messenger. Yeah, I mean, it's it's really a very it's a really relaxed personal relationship, and we don't always agree about everything, but we don't fight about stuff. We don't butt heads. We have we're both pragmatists, and we look at things at how they are, but we're also dreamers, and we're looking at how we can make something big happen, and how we can do cool stuff, and how we can make the most out of what we have, even though it's still indie stuff. So our budgets are nowhere near the same as other people's at the highest level, and we have to stretch that dollar a lot further. But I think we've done a hell of a job so far, and I like to think that the wrestlers themselves would be the best example of that, and how much they've enjoyed being a part of it, and how many of them still want to be a part of Bloodsport. And we can't run enough shows for everyone, and sadly, not everybody that reaches out is of the stuff to be in Bloodsport. But to me, that's just like, okay, that's fine. A lot of us were not where we were not of the caliber of where we ended up. We had to work to get there. We had to build on that, and it became important to us. And anything that could be a positive get or carrot on a stick for anybody, or maybe I shouldn't say carrot on a stick, because that's the idea that it's just leading you there, that you can never achieve it, but in fact something that is tangible that they can get a hold of. If good, anything that makes these wrestlers better, because better wrestlers is better product, is better fans, is hopefully better everything. I really feel like it's always, if at all possible, best to build things and invest in the structure of it all, then in a positive way, than to be negative about it. I mean, there's plenty of, you can always find critique, you can always find criticism, legitimate or otherwise. So doing things well and supporting those wrestlers to do things well, and if it doesn't come off well, to just learn how to do it better, and to be a part of the process of growing in in that positive direction, being better wrestlers, being better about the sport and the business of professional wrestling, than not.
Something really cool about the Japan GCW show was Sakuraba. I was like, wow, they got Sakuraba. Rampage obviously is awesome
Yeah.
too, but I mean that to me, that's just like, I don't know. It makes it seem like, wow, they can get, when they go to Japan, they can get, maybe the biggest or maybe the best of all time with Sakuraba, a huge legend like Rampage showing up. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
guys, it just seems like one of those things where you can't not miss a show, because then you're like, who the hell, like Sakuraba's on this show. To me, it's just cool. It's like anybody could be on it.
It was a dream come true to stand there. A dream I didn't necessarily even know I really had until I had it. To stand there in sumo hall, Ryogoku Kokugikan, and just look at the ring, the banners being put up and everything, and go like, holy shit, I'm this is something I'm doing. This is incredible. And that Bloodsport Bushido show was absolutely fantastic. And if people even knew the half of what we had to go through to make that show actually happen, and how much in peril it had been at different times for really stupid reasons. But this is the thing: when you get into business, when you try to build something, unless you can stand and afford to do it all by yourself, which that's practically no one, um, it's you have to rely on a lot of different people. And we're very fortunate for a lot of the folks that we had involved in that show, and we were able to, at the end of the day, make it a reality. Now, I'd like to do a Bloodsport Bushido show once a year in Japan. We'll see. It's very difficult to make happen, and just for a little background on that, not as a brag, not meant to be in any way, but I think that I may be the only gaijin to come out, start a company in Japan, because you need to have your own you have your own corporation in Japan, your own business in Japan, to get your tax stamps and to do this and to do that. To start an office in Japan and literally make a pro wrestling show in Japan, let alone at Ryogoku Kokugikan, such a big and uh, prestigious arena as that. It was a really daunting project, and it may be a kind of a one of its own, a one of a kind. And that's not to say that it's impossible for foreigners to do such a thing, but generally it's just not something they can navigate. And even at times, the differences between Western ways of doing business and Japanese ways of doing business don't always meet up, and it can be very difficult for the Western sort to navigate. Um, so, hey, I'm very lucky for my team that I have in Japan, and just also for being able to build enough reputation that I could try and put something like that together. It was pretty crazy. And, man, I imagine someday I'll have to probably tell the story.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if we can get into it too much, but yeah, it almost didn't happen, basically.
Almost didn't happen. Yeah. It was very touch and go at
Wow.
times. But an
Yeah, I've always
incredible
heard.
show, and it looked amazing. Like the people that did the lighting and the sound for us, and the way it was shot for Abema. Whew, I mean, I was standing there in the back, warming up and stretching out a little bit, looking at the monitor and just getting goosebumps.
Yeah, that's awesome that you were able to pull that off. You always hear about the Japanese. Can they let somebody else come in and run a show? I mean, very controlled, I guess. Sometimes even MMA was hard. Like Bellator was trying to get in there for years, and they finally got in there. I mean, it seemed like it's a very
Mm-hmm.
hard place to crack.
It can be, especially if you don't have the right people on the ground, so to speak. It just isn't going to happen. And if you don't understand how to do business with the Japanese, it's going to be really, really, really difficult.
So with Bloodsport, I feel like maybe the most unique thing is just the look of it. It doesn't look like another promotion. It doesn't look like anything else you'll see. Is that like the big selling point? Obviously, besides the in ring stuff, but is that like a huge selling point to you that you don't want it to look like anything else?
No, I don't. And I think the not having ropes helps us out in a lot of ways. But honestly, looking like everybody else means you're all basically fighting over the same piece of the pie. And we're not trying to grab pie, we're trying to grab,
Yeah.
I don't, we're trying to grab medium rare steaks, wagyus, we're trying to do meat and potatoes, but to the best of our ability, and in our own way. Like, there'd be no point in trying to just put together more of the same wrestling. In my opinion, it would just make us something within the sea of already available choices. And with Bloodsport, we have an opportunity to do something entirely unique and different from what anybody else can do. Um, and again, this isn't about elevating myself, but it's by me being the person behind this. It can happen, and these matches can be put together. The athletes can be found, worked with, trained, like the way that things are presented, and it's just because I've been fortunate enough to have the experience that I have had and the teachers that I have had, and come from the background not only in MMA but also in pro wrestling that I've had. So it's just that type of person is incredibly rare. It just doesn't really exist anymore due to just the way, the nature of how pro wrestling's been for the last 20, 30 years, people like the Billy Robinsons, the Inokis, and the Gotchas, they've all passed away. And while there are those that are still from that lineage, a lot of them, they're not really looking to promote, like, could Minoru Suzuki put together something like this? Yeah, quite possibly. If he wants to be a promoter, can Akira Maeda? 100%. Like that guy, every time I can get an opportunity to sit down and break bread with him and pick his brain and learn about not only his pro wrestling and MMA journey, but how it was for him as a promoter and a booker, and as a coach, because the Rings Dojo, that was him. That is, to me, like a really rare opportunity to take advantage of when it's available to me. And I know probably a lot of modern fans don't even really know who he is or why he even would be somebody that I think is so very important to the development of what I'm doing.
Man, there's so many of those legendary guys, and like kind of not really an offspring of him, but like when Sakuraba comes in, like almost
Mm-hmm.
like that next generation of guys. Very cool to see like a guy like that that's still active that can still go.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, and I have wanted to have Sakuraba a part of Bloodsport as well as Funaki, and by being in Japan, I was able to make that happen and to put together some stellar matches, and to do something like you'll hear about, people on the internet talk about, oh yeah, well, Anthony Corelli's got a background in judo, or he's done this and he's done that, and then it's like, yeah, watch it, watch him in the ring and watch him and understand how legitimate this guy is. And when you sit back and you see him and Sakuraba trading hold for hold, that you now get a different impression. It's not just about reading about it on some thread somewhere or on some forum. It's about really seeing it in action and understanding this guy really is the real deal. And to be able to take, Anthony Corelli, who everyone knows as Santino, and
Yep.
then having Sakuraba and him matched up, people are like, "Whoa, what a wild idea!" But then you start to see it's not that wild at all. He's perfect. These guys are perfect for each other, well matched.
Definitely. And even like a guy like Johnny Bloodsport's like, man, this guy's obviously so athletic, but it's like, man, he could pull off some stuff that you wouldn't expect him to be able to pull off.
Well, John Hennigan was a collegiate wrestler, and
Yep.
he is strong as hell. He's very agile, as we all very much know. He's also weighs a ton of bricks when he's on top. For those of you who aren't really that familiar with wrestling and grappling, look, when somebody can get top position and just feels like you're being covered by a bag of quickcrete, concrete, one of those ready patch bags, that sucks. It's just a huge pain in the ass. And being as strong as John is, on top of being heavy like that, man, I've just seen him dog people out in the gym at times. Just he's not really going for subs. He's not pulling off, not going for too many crazy things. He's just smashing them into the floor. I've also watched him like pretty much like do a backflip over a guy as he shoots a double at him, and it's like, how did you do that? It's just insane. You're too
Yep.
big to move like that.
Kind of reminds me of maybe a young babyface assassin, just as far as you saying being heavy on the top. I was at a
Oh,
show
yeah, a little different.
well, yeah, well, yeah, you're obviously a lot bigger than him, but it's. I remember being at a show in Dallas, and you had Brett Rogers down. Brett Rogers I mean, he's huge. He's just a
Mm-hmm.
monstrous guy. You had him down, and he was saying you were so heavy, he couldn't do anything. You were so heavy on top, and obviously you end up submitting him. And I remember you did the
Yeah.
same thing to Karatanov, who was another
Mm-hmm.
guy who's like a monster. So like being heavy on top, and obviously being able to smartly use it, I mean, that's deadly.
That's a great skill. It's a skill that I think comes to people later in their career as a martial artist in the grappling sense of things. But if you can, the sooner you can master that concept of how to not just lay on somebody, but how to really try to center and coordinate it so that your weight is almost like it's falling through your opponent, that will take you very, very, very far. And it's like, in a sense, having a weapon that costs you nothing. And I always like to make the joke at the seminars, make I want to take advantage of all these cheeseburgers and bacon and steaks and all the whiskey I've been drinking. I want to any cookies
Right.
that may have made their way into my mouth. I want to take advantage of that. I spent the time eating it, so I want to make use of
Right, yeah, and use that for your top game, yeah, and
it.
be able to
Mhm.
really, keep the guy down, obviously. So, MMA wise, are you officially retired? Are you done,
Yeah,
in the world of
pretty much. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a hankering to maybe get one or two more, but for the most part, I think I'm over it. I'm done.
did you want a retirement fight? You know, like, that's, like, the big thing. Oh, they're
Yeah,
retiring, they get the big retire, they get the send off. Do you want that still, or did you want that?
that's part of the thinking in my brain. There's a few things that I wanted to try and shoot for, but I just don't think the body and the schedule would allow it. There comes a point where you have to make a decision as to what you can sacrifice some time for and with. And at this late in the game, it's like, I think it might be better to invest in something else.
When you look at Fedor, obviously that's a guy that you could have fought. It could have happened, was going to happen. All that stuff. Where does that stick in your craw a little bit that you never got the Fedor fight? Because even his retirement match, I thought was
Yeah.
going to be against you.
Yeah. Well, but if you're in this game long enough, you realize that your ability to make fights happen is a lot less than you really think. And you can go out there and you can make a fool of yourself, call them for a fight, and you can do all that. You can try to get under that person's skin. You can do, but there's the promoter, there's the manager, there's the opponent. Like, all three of these things could all have varying different opinions, and none of them line up in your favor. And it's a tragedy, but it is just simply a part of history now, and that's that. I would have loved to have tangled with them. And even at the very least, it's an odd sentiment maybe, but I would have loved to have been a part of helping him for his last few fights, just so that he was as sharp as I'd seen him when we were over in Pride, because I don't want the Crocops, the Overeems, the Fyodors, or any of these people that I was, you know, out there fighting in the day to day with in and around. I don't want them to go out without. I don't want to see them decline in any way that diminishes or puts any damage to their legacy, because it's too easy for people to be dismissive and really derisive to these athletes. When they didn't ride with them through the whole journey. Instead, they catch them as a new casual, and then all they have is just really obnoxious things to say about them, and they'll spend more time trying to burn a person down than to trying to just support what it is that they like. And it's really unfortunate. So I don't like to see that when it's people that I know, especially. But when you get into the entertainment business, you realize that you're just putting yourself out there to be critiqued and judged literally every day for anything you do. And if that's too much for you, then this is really the wrong industry to be a part of. But knowing how hard a lot of these people train and the things that they have to push through to get into that ring and to be at the level of the top of the cream of the crop, the top of all the other fighters in their weight classes, it's grueling, and I have a lot of sympathy.
Was that close at all for the last fight versus Fedor? Because I know that was
I
a
don't think
rumor out
so.
there, but was it close? No.
Not I don't think so.
Was that like on Coker, or is that on Fader, or is that on for not getting it done?
Don't know. No clue. And with a lot of this kind of stuff, I just do my thing. If it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
And it's interesting you bring up Pride because I think that was by far the number one organization. I know people like to say, "Oh, UFC," but if you actually look at it, the UFC was nothing compared to what Pride was at Pride's peak. You know what I mean? It was people. I think because how big UFC got now, they don't really think of Pride as being as big, but Pride was well, a lot bigger.
It was, and I would say the UFC is the biggest thing that MMA has ever been. Not
Yeah,
for any one specific event, but because of the expansive international network of distribution, media distribution, of uh, the amount of shows that they're doing, and everything that goes with being a part of the overall media sports and media machine. Like this is enormous now, way bigger than anything Pride ever did in that
right.
regards. But
Yeah,
show to show for show, no, nothing beats Pride. Nothing beats Pride, arguably, except for K1. And if you want to delineate MMA from kickboxing as being completely separate entities, but otherwise, if you just talk in combat sports as a general, yeah, it's K1 did like 75,000 at the Tokyo Dome and stuff like that. And then Pride, of course, with 93,000 Tokyo National Stadium and all the
yeah,
Saitama shows and everything. And you know, I was telling somebody the other day, like I've been at many shows that are bigger than any show that the UFC has ever held. And people don't, it just, that whole concept is lost on them. But, the UFC has made a huge platform now for so many fighters to be a part of. I mean, they've got like an enormous roster to fill all the different media dates that are needed for these events. But I mean, you can get into the argument of what's more important: specialized, specific, big get-together events, or even with maybe smaller events that lead into that, into a buildup, or constant coverage everywhere all the time. You know, personally, I don't want to see a UFC card every weekend. I don't want it at all. I don't. I mean, I'd probably cut half the roster, if not more, and just send them on their way, and then keep maybe the next half of them only on like first preference towards booking towards us if I was a UFC, but otherwise go out and make your career. And I don't care about your wins and your losses too much. I just want to care if you still seem like you're a capable athlete who can bring the thunder, bring the entertainment, and bring some fans. Then we got something to talk about, and maybe you'll find your flourish here or somewhere else. But and then the rest of them, it's like it's a full investment. They'd be on an exclusive contract with far less aspects in terms of like clauses at which I can just terminate your. I just would want you to go in there and fight, feeling like you're secure, even if you lose. Lose two in a row. I'm not necessarily worried about that. Lose three in a row, four in a row. Depends on how you lost them and who you lost them to. And take every fighter as an individual and every fight as an individual fight, and then look at it as a whole. But I like the big events. I'd like to see one night tournaments again. I'd like to see a lot of different things, but um, that's my preference personally. I mean, that's the way combat sports has been as far back as I can see for the most part. But this is a new age. This is dare say it, probably even the start of potentially a new type of man. We can leave all reservation out, or all we can leave out any decisions on and judgments as to whether that's a good or bad thing. But things are changing a lot in terms of entertainment and how it's delivered and how people how they want to interact with it and how they even want to digest it.
I do think with Pride, they had, like you said, like the bigger shows. You think that they had the better fighters too?
Yes, definitely the Pride heavyweight division, best in all of MMA history.
If you look at Fedor, Big Nog, yourself, Crow Cop, I mean, whew, just absolutely stacked, loaded with the best of the best, and
Hmm.
in their prime. I know people
Hmm.
when they get a UFC, Crow Cop is injured. Big Nog, my God, he had half of his hip or whatever, whatever the heck was going on. There were so many injuries with those guys because of all the battles they had in Pride.
Yes, no, but pretty much all the guys that transitioned over from Pride to the UFC did so in the later stages of their careers,
Yeah.
and that wear and tear takes a lot on you. Plus, a lot of these guys were far more active when they were in Pride. We were able to fight more.
Way more, yeah. And it's interesting too because Anderson Silva and Chuck Liddell, kind of like the two UFC poster boys for being, the best in their divisions. They didn't fare too well in Pride for the most part. I mean, Liddell got knocked out by Rampage. Anderson Silva got tapped out a few times. So I mean, they didn't really. I mean, they did well, but they weren't, killing it like they killed it in
Yeah,
UFC.
yeah. I mean, Anderson found his stride in the UFC, and I feel like Chuck did too as well. I mean, not like he wasn't a pretty peak level Chuck when he fought Rampage because he was.
Right. Yeah.
But and also, by the way, they also were able to fight a lot more than guys do now these days. And with the amount of cards that need to be filled up in advance so that they have a card to promote, and so that the whichever, excuse me, whichever station or channel or service is streaming this fight is aware of who they got, and they can get the machine going for the PR and set all the travel and all this kind of stuff up. You can't just slot in Chuck Liddell's every other card like they kind of used to, or Anderson getting 3, 4 fights in a year or something like that. I mean, now a guy fights 3 times a year. People are like, oh my God. It's like, man, I fought
Right.
7 times
Yeah.
in 14 months once. So that's just what we used to do.
For sure. And I feel like sometimes they put out these fight nights or these cards, and I don't even know half the guys that are fighting either. It's like they're just putting out shows to put out shows. It's not really great for fans.
Well, I mean, that's one of the, you could call it the downside of the current UFC model. But with all of those cards means that they have significant deals to produce and deliver content. And it's not just the UFC. I mean, it's easy for us to specifically look at them because we're in the realm of combat sports. That's what we're talking about. That's what we are. That's where we work, and a lot of our what we do in our day to day. But everything in terms of entertainment is becoming like this. We don't. We have this Netflix model of you release a whole series and people binge watch instead of, we do still have like your HBO Maxes where they'll drop something on a Sunday and it's got to be next Sunday, and they'll pull you along for 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is. But more often than not, it is Netflix style. Everything is delivered to you. Just chew it up as you will. Um, a lot of the initial numbers probably look really heavily skewed towards the first 2 weeks, probably, of a content being delivered, and probably sharply decline after that. It's just the delivery model is all different. What they're probably looking for in terms of metrics, probably the way that products are integrated into different pieces of media for some kind of sponsorship deal. All this has changed. Everything is different about, and I feel like they're probably going to be even more different yet over the next 5 years. I think we're in a big transitional phase.
Do you have any sort of relationship with Dana White and UFC right now? Is there anything there or no?
Every time I see him, we shake hands, chit chat, smiles. We're good. I imagine if I grabbed the phone and called him, he'd pick up and ask me what I needed. So, I mean, my job as a manager and as a trainer is to be as professional as I can at all times. And the trouble is, sometimes you don't like something, sometimes you love stuff, but it's best to keep that stuff close to the vest. And, unless it's a necessity, you just keep working forward and doing your best to make your clients the best that they can be, and for you to get them the best deals and look out for their best interests. And, I know there's a lot of talk as of recent, especially with the antitrust lawsuit, the first one, the Lee case being, well, potentially settled. And then you've got the Johnson case that'll move forward. And, a lot of talk about fighter pay and all that. And yes, I believe that there is a lot that should be done towards fighter pay and compensation in other ways and incentives. But I still end up getting into big headbutting contests with the people that are just way outside of reality in terms of what fighter pay, what that even means, and who is it that we're really arguing for here. And it just becomes a lot of yelling and screaming with people that don't understand not only the what it's like to run a promotion and to put something together, to be on the promoter side of things, but also just general economics. They have no understanding. Everyone that makes the example of the NBA does this or the NFL does that, it's like, it's not a legitimate example, because it's a completely different model. You have a league, which is this neutral body with all of these teams within it, and those teams are almost they're all their own corporations that can bid and compete for any player within the league as it exists and without. And outside of that, they could go and grab like somebody off the All Blacks and pull them in, and I'm going to make a running back out of you or whatever. I mean, that's all up to them. I'm going to grab the sumo yokozuna and turn him into a nose guard or a guard. I mean, they could do that if they wanted to. And within, they can trade and look for picks or trade for the other things or just straight up money, pick up free agents. It's a completely different model. And within that, these corporations now give cuts back to all of their players who are a part of it through that players association. And then the giant overarching organization can do things and then incorporate the players into incentivizing their name and image and likeness off of the merchandise, or even just being a part of the NFL or the NBA or what have you. I think, if anything, learning how to better offer incentives towards those who are at a certain point, especially, if you're on the poster, if you're on the promotional materials, if it's all about you versus whomever, well, that means that they believe that not only the fight, but each fighter within it are capable of drawing an audience well enough to be the main event and to make this a profitable show. So, hey, allow that fighter to capitalize on whatever growth that they've been able to create in the entertainment sphere, in the fan base. If they can get people to buy the shirt with them on them at such a degree, then you should give them a cut of that. If people tune in on television, the ratings are of a certain amount during their fight and during the card as a whole, or pay-per-view, what have you, like, cut them in. That's the thing that differentiates boxing from MMA. I mean, the promoter still makes more money than the boxer does. Why wouldn't they? But because they put all the money up, they did all this. But when you see the crazy paydays, you need to understand that that main event fighter, let's say a Floyd Mayweather or an Oscar De La Hoya, he was the promoter and the main event fighter. So they were double dipping, which is why they were able to get such phenomenally huge paydays. But even if the fighter is just working under a promoter like Eddie Hearn or let me think. We were talking boxing last weekend.
Bob Arum.
Bob Arum, right? Okay, well, these boxers get paid to fight. Then they're fighting over a purse if they get to take on top of that. And then they're going to be cut in on the pay-per-view money. They're going to be cut in on perhaps on ticket sales to a degree, on food and beverage and merchandising and sub licenses. I mean, they get cuts of all of that. So now when you're opened up into making money off of all of these things, great and small, it increases your payday substantially. Or if you don't draw shit, you don't pull in the big money. Nobody ever talks about when a card flops and that fighter didn't draw in the money that they had expected. Nobody ever really brings that up. They only talk about when somebody gets a payday. Maybe somebody managed to pull in. They had a $150,000 fight pay guarantee. Maybe they won $100,000 purse, but all the incentives were all low. So that's pretty much the B. They only pulled in maybe another 50K off of everything else. Nobody ever talks about it. They say, oh, they made this, and they made that, and that's it. But I'm sure there are plenty of examples out there. If you really had the information, if you had the data, you'd see that some fighters were drawing and some were not just based on just numbers of viewers, but also ticket sales and merchandise sales and food and beverage in the arena and just stuff like that. So personally, all of this stuff is a gamble on yourself anyways. So I'd rather be given more freedom to bet on me than less.
Now, as we hit the wind down, we head towards the finish here. What's the biggest accomplishment as far as your wrestling career on the wrestling thing? Would it be the Tokyo Dome main event? Would it be the Nagata match? I feel like the New Japan main event. I mean, pretty high up there. It's got to be.
Yeah, but no. My greatest
Oh,
accomplishment is Bloodsport Bushido in Yoku Kokugikan. That is it. Um, and perhaps all the people that I've trained. Those are my greatest accomplishments.
who is on the list? I know Shayna Baszler, but who else? Maybe it's people like I wouldn't even realize that you had a hand in.
Trained Andy Williams, the Butcher from AEW. In fact, I was trying to get him to come with me to wrestle in IGF. And he had
Wow.
done some pro wrestling training for a while. He wrestled in high school. He'd been in plenty of street fights. And I was just like, he's a big wrestling. He still is, I'm sure, a huge wrestling fan. But he was such a big wrestling fan, me as well. So we chat about it all the time. And I'd say, why don't you get in the ring? And he'd get put up to do like these run-ins or this or that, little small um, appearances of sorts. I said, look, man, you got to get in the ring and wrestle. And he'd always go, I just want to get one match and then call it good. And I'm like, no, that's the wrong. No, 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 no. If you think you're going to get in the ring just one time and be done with it, I will literally fucking grab you and drag your ass back into a ring and beat the shit out of you just so that you
Yeah.
have more than one match and insist you keep going, because doing it once will never be enough, especially if you go out there and you really go out and you can be in your own in that ring and work a match. You're not going to be satisfied with one. You're going to want to do more and more and more. And there are times where I'd have like him and Roderick Strong all training in a cage with me and doing wall stuff and doing other things, submission wrestling. And it turned out at some point that he loved it enough to be a part of, to sign up with AEW, things of that nature. I've trained JR Kratos, uh, Tim Thatcher, Jeff Cobb. I've worked quite a bit with, he's going by Axel Wolf now, but he was in NXT as, God, what did they call him over there? Axel. Anyways, the real name's Axel Tischer. I've worked with him as
Yeah.
well. I've worked a little bit with Gunther in the past. I've worked with Jonah. Uh, in Japan, I am one of the. I've been brought on as a part of the coaching staff for the young lions and the young guys in the gym, stepping in at the New Japan Dojo. Um, I've worked with Shinsuke Nakamura and trained him in the past, and I've trained Tanahashi and Toru Yano and a lot of different guys. I've had my hands in working with them, if only just showing them catch as catch can, but also some people with stuff in regards to professional wrestling. And I've been had the fortunate life to have people like Chono and Nagata and Liger work a ton with me. Christopher Daniels worked with me, Mike Barton and Scott Norton, and tried at Perry Saturn as my first tag partner, and to get every bit of information that I could from every single veteran that I got to be around, and just to always pick their brains to try and understand why they did what it was the way they did it, and who taught them, why they teach you. It is anything I could get from them, and of course we've got Marina Shafir. who I've worked with quite a bit. And, even though it seems like we're constant rivals in the ring, me and John Moxley have spent a lot of time on the mats together.
Awesome. I love that. Now, of course, 11/24, Bloodsport, White Eagle Hall, Jersey City, New Jersey. Give us one last final push where everybody could find it, see it, and obviously see you versus MVP in the main event.
Come to the birthplace of Josh Barnett's Bloodsport. Come see where it all started. And if you were there in the beginning, come see where we're at this point. And just know that you're going to be seeing something that you can't find anywhere else. Wrestlers in ways that you will not see them everywhere else. And this is the hardest hitting event in professional wrestling for a reason. So don't be squeamish.
I love it. Where can everybody see it? Triller, Fight TV? Where else can
Well,
everybody
yeah,
see it?
Triller TV, Fight TV. I don't know how they like the best brand themselves these days. I believe through GCW we're on Triller Plus, but they usually run signups for around events like this. That'll give you an opportunity to watch it free, Triller Plus, for a week or so. You can also see it by being there live at White Eagle Hall, and go online to my Twitter or Instagram or GCW's, or even just look up Josh Barnett's Bloodsport White Eagle Hall tickets, and I'm sure it'll come up. And go ahead and get your tickets so you can come watch it live.
Where can everybody follow you? What's your Twitter handles and your socials?
At Josh L. Barnett on Twitter and Instagram, and Josh Barnett Official, I believe, on Facebook. And that's pretty much it, besides joshbarnett.com, which will lead you off to everything I'm involved in with Warbringer Bourbon, War Materials, MMA training gear, the ACWA, the American Catch Wrestling Association, and we have the U.S. Open of Catch Wrestling coming up in December 22nd, Orange County, California. It'll be our second annual, and it's the national championships for catch wrestling.
All right. Awesome. Check out, of course, Bloodsport coming up on the 24th of November, White Eagle Hall, and check out Bloodsport going forward as well. Thank you, Josh, for all the time. Really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, John.